Hello, welcome back. I'm Cara Dahl Russell, and this is the third part of Programming Your Program, how to create a program that is more interesting and engaging for your audience. Again, this was the program talk that I gave as part of the 4th annual Christopher Newport University Harp Festival. It was an online event. It was available online, but because of COVID, it had reduced attendance actually that day. And I'm putting this online so I can be more free to interject additional comments and to give you a little additional details and background that I couldn't within the time constraints of that day. So in the last section, we talked about the overview format of your program, as well as who do you think your market is. And where that led us to is where we start today, is something that's intrinsically connected with who is your market really. Part of that answer is going to come from where is your heart as a musician and a performer. The book Beyond Music, Making a Successful Career in Music was written by Angela Miles Beeching. She has many interesting insights on how to build your career better, a lot of it is really focused on how to be more disciplined in your approach to promoting yourself and your work as a musician. One of the things she talks about is that you have to think like the person who's putting together the performance lineup at the venue where you are approaching. If they want to hire a big name like Yolanda Condenasis or some other nationally recognized name, that's who they'll hire. So then the question is, for you, is why choose you? Event planners want to know what's different about what you do, about your music. What's different about what you're doing that makes it engaging? And this difference is defined by what and who you think your market is, combined with where your heart is musically, what really speaks deeply to you. And the piece that is very often completely left out, which I feel is your special sauce. What are your personal interests? Often extra musical interests. And how do you bring that part of your life and that enthusiasm into your music program? While I was on air, one of the people I interviewed was a soprano who has sung internationally and regularly at the Met. When I interviewed her, she was touring in Europe. She had just gotten back from Europe. But what she was really excited about was her jazz album. She said, I never really wanted to sing opera. She was coming to terms also with the personal issues involved in having a big international career. The travel, being away from home, being lonely. And she found that very hard. But of course, it was fascinating that here she has this career that many people work for and dream of all of their life. But, at least at that moment, it wasn't bringing her joy. It wasn't the thing that really excited her. One of my favorite people to interview in my time on the air was concert pianist Ivan Illich, or to Americanize it, say Ivan Illich, so that you can figure out how to spell it. I also interviewed him. He went to the Paris Conservatoire after majoring in science. So he started off already a little more interesting and having a broader perspective than some other people. He told me how he went to school with some brilliant pianists who simply stopped playing once they left school because they had never really liked it. And for himself, he said, quote, I'm not a concert artist who's going to be traveling the world playing the warhorse concertos that everyone expects to hear. I'm not sure that is my gift, and I definitely know it does not maintain my interest, unquote. And I can quote that because I remember it, because it just resonated so strongly with me. And the self-knowledge that he had to say, I'm not sure that is my gift, but I definitely know it doesn't maintain my interest. Once you can identify these things for yourself, it can help you really let go of a lot of the other things. It can let you go to the competitive feelings you have towards the success of others. You can say, oh, I love that she does that, but that's not what I do, and I'm not interested in that. And it can also help you identify, oh, that person does something that I really want to do well, so I can learn from that person and I can get inspiration from that person. I personally am invested in finding older music that has been mostly forgotten and then bringing these works to an audience via the harp. So I'm going to share one of these. That's kind of essentially where my heart is. It's a piece by Pauline Viardot. She was extremely famous in her lifetime as a mezzo-soprano. Her sister, Maria Malibran, was a famous soprano. Pauline also composed. She was friends with some of the great artists of her day. Chopin wrote his Berceuse, his lullaby, for her baby. So this is a little-known piece that combines her Spanish heritage with her French life. She grew up in Paris. It's called Solitude, and you'll immediately hear the Spanish sound with the great French poetry. So if you click here, is a great time for you to stop and take a moment to listen to the piece. Again, notice that I combined the work of a great artist to further enhance the mood of the piece. Again, part of what I do as an interdisciplinary artist. So, shedding light on the performer and the piece and the artwork, and then my own interpretation and transcription of it. So click here, and I'll pause while, please do take a moment and listen to that, and then I'll continue with the rest of this talk. So I hope you enjoyed that, Solitude by Pauline Viardot. And both of the pieces that I've referred to in this, I also have available as for sale as sheet music. I'll take a minute to say that, again, another piece of my gig life is doing transcriptions of these pieces. They're available on Etsy as pear-shaped tones, one word, because that's you know, the harp is pear-shaped, the cello's pear-shaped, and so am I. Pear-shaped tones. And also, you can also contact me through my Facebook page if you're interested in getting the music for either of those pieces. So that essentially is where my heart is. And there's actually another piece that's much longer that I feel is like, oh, it's exactly where my heart is and where I live. But this is the piece that I chose to do at the Harp Festival at Christopher Newport University. So I'm keeping that consistent with this. Now, part of, again, knowing where your heart is, you have to have a pretty clear-eyed view of knowing your strengths and weaknesses. And I mentioned before that your teacher can really help you with this. And also, this definitely grows and changes. If you are a young student who's in high school and college, you're still growing and changing, and these things will probably coalesce more for you later in your life, but they're starting to come together now, and you want to be aware of them and know what interests you now, because that may color what interests you later. Coming from an acting background, actors are taught to define themselves very particularly. Some will say, I'm an actor, or I'm a singer-actor, I'm a dancer who acts, I'm an actor who moves well but doesn't sing. I'm an actor who sings and dances, the triple threat. For me, I'm an actress who plays the harp, sings, and moves well. I put the harp first because the harp is, I always joke about this. People forget that you're a singer once you play the harp. Because that's the thing they notice more. So that's that's why I put it in that order. But I could have said I'm an actress who sings and plays the harp and moves well. Musicians, in general, need to get better at asking ourselves from time to time, how do I define myself? We can usually tell you right off the bat if we're good as an accompanist or if we're good at improvising, but we're not so good at defining our performance skills. Now, side note, performance skills. If you're not confident about your public speaking or your presentation, take some classes. This performance with your harp, in your music, whatever your instrument is, it's a performance. You should be willing to work on those aspects. Some of those aspects are basic acting, clarity of speech, volume of your speech, stage presence, the ability to transmit a mood, whether or not this is acting, whether or not it's the mood you come in with, it's the mood you want your audience to feel while you're performing. And by the way, if you know someone who plans festivals, I had hoped at CNU to do a stage presentation workshop for musicians. This is a workshop that I've done as an adjunct to some of my acting workshops that I've taught. This is stage presentation for musicians. We couldn't do it because we weren't having any breakout sessions because of COVID. But that's something that I'm available to do in the future at your festival, if you're holding a festival. So that's something else that's easy to work into a festival as a breakout session and get some really intense work with some people who want to work on that extracurricular bit of the performance that isn't part of actually playing. So what I'm talking about, back to that subject, is knowing your skill breakdown, all of the skills that are needed when you're performing. It's actually made me laugh at times, as either when I'm interviewing a new student at the university, we're having our first meeting, and or when I've been in lessons with a student for a while, and if I happen to say, "Are you a musician?" and they'll say, "No," and then oh wait, no. So these are questions to ask yourself. Are you a musician? Are you a technician? Are you a craftsperson? Are you an artist? Are you a performer? Are you a writer? Are you a speaker? Are you an entertainer? Example, you don't need to be a good entertainer to play a regular gig of background music. Although there are people that play background music who are highly entertaining. In the Washington, D.C. area, there's a woman, Kristen Jefferson, who plays for Tease at the Willard, she doesn't just play the harp, she's also a singer, and she also has great comic chops, and she has a lot of interaction while she plays. Marvelously entertaining. If you haven't checked out the YouTube page of harpist Tongwan Wang, who works at a hotel in Bangkok, she is an explosive performer. She just has this way of emphasizing what she does that is just highly dramatic, highly infectious, and decidedly entertaining as a background performer. On the flip side, great technicians who are poor entertainers can be wonderful to have in the orchestra. If everything else is there, all those other components of being a master of the instrument, but just not a particularly great entertainer, those are people that are sought after in many orchestras. Definitely for the serviceable jobs, maybe not for the solo spots, for the serviceable jobs. You have to have the self-knowledge to know what these strengths and weaknesses are to be able to perform at your best advantage. And I'm going to say something now that's probably some people will take offense to, but this is my observation that even some of the very best solo performers are not particularly entertaining. They are not as entertaining as they could be if they had more performance skills. Think of some of the great pianists who are not only great pianists, but they are really entertaining and sometimes even funny to watch, and intentionally funny. You have those standout people. We have very few of these in the harp world. And in the harp world, there seems to be a distinction of the people who are performers and entertainers are not taken as seriously. These are just observations, but my observations. And you can take that as you will. And it's not, I'm not fault finding. I'm saying these are things that you can observe for yourself and think about them and inculcate. Even watch some of the very greats and say, what could they do better? What are their strengths and weaknesses? Because no one is perfect. And I have a quote about that later. So I'm talking about knowing yourself and bringing your full self to the table and your audience. Not just your harp student self, but your whole person. And this is your special sauce. There's a group called Quarteto Gelato, a chamber group that plays traditional quartets and quintets, with the difference that instead of having a pianist as part of the mix, an accordion player takes the piano parts. They also cross boundaries into folk music and world music. The oboist with the group is Colin Mayer, and he says, I'm a performer, not a musician. He plays oboe and violin, and he's performed with Cirque du Soleil. His self-definition has brought him a much broader career than the concert hall. Austrian harpist and composer Sabrina James has said, I'm not really a harpist, meaning she's not a concert harpist, that she usually plays pop covers and her own original works. And guess what? That means she works a lot. She also juggles, and I mean high-profile Las Vegas nightclub-style juggling. She even juggles fire. She writes and directs children's theater, writes her own music for these shows, both solo shows and experimental theater work. She embodies the gig economy. Once she played for an event at a Harley motorcycle shop where her presence, her juggling, her harp, her singing pop rock, and her ability to entertain made it a family-friendly event. She managed to tap into the Harley-Davidson family market. Now, I mean, who could have even conceived of that? And that's just brilliance. Sophie Bondwell is a French harpist and comedienne. She wears wacky outfits and entertains with stories and harp. Oh, you can add storytelling to that list. Are you a storyteller? Even if the story is within the music, are you invested in the storytelling? Some of what I do with composer biographies and history is really an entertaining form of music appreciation teaching or biography teaching. A quote a snippet of poetry, a reading, even a brief anecdote about a composer, or a story about why you personally love this piece helps the audience connect with the piece. But more importantly, it helps them connect with you. That's your special sauce. And it makes selling your performance much easier if you can identify what it is, that this is what I do. The easiest way to incorporate your interests is a theme program. And we see this, especially teachers that teach young children are really good at theme programs. We see them all the time, and we see them so frequently, we forget that this is an engaging way to bring something more to the program than just the music itself. We see these theme programs all the time. The seasons, or a particular season, is a common theme. Thanksgiving, Halloween, Christmas programs, those are theme programs. Around the world is a common theme. It's become so common that it also is meaningless now for harpists who say, I play music from around the world, because most of us do. But you can still see that it's more appealing than just a generic recital. And of course, you can fine-tune that around the world theme to various locales or focuses. Flowers is another common theme. And for harp, there's always themes of water and meditation. Now, don't be afraid to make an odd choice. A young baritone friend of mine, Jeffrey Todd, mentioned online to his online friends, he said, what could you talk about for 20 minutes that's not related to your work? No, and most of us in his circles are artists of one kind or another. And I said, that thing that you think isn't related to your work, that's what you should be including in your musical work. That thing that you can talk about for 20 minutes, that excites you, that energizes you, find a way to build a program of music around that, so that you can bring that enthusiasm and that interest and that quirkiness of yourself into your program and enhance it with the music that you love and the music that, however peripherally, you feel fits with that topic. So I was trying to think like really outside the box. What would seem like a really wacky thing? Let's say somebody loved hunting. That actually is a theme that would be pretty easy to build a harp program around. Lots of composers wrote music about hunting specifically, hunting themes, but also pieces related to woods and fields, and maybe even pieces about dogs. But now imagine seeing a program advertised, harp music about hunting. Right away, you have the wow factor of that's interesting. It's also more interesting to advertise. And if it's something that excites you, it's contagious. So I say, add that extracurricular interest into your music program. It adds variety, and it helps keep people invested and engaged. On the attached sheet, I gave you a list of almost all of these people that I've been fortunate to know and interview through my radio work, as well as other harpists that I've been fortunate to come to know through the magic of social media. Take your inspiration where you can find it. And it's, especially if you're young, it's very hard to not allow yourself to be swayed by the opinions of others. But know that once you're beyond the teaching and training phase is when you can really come into your own as an artist and really start making decisions that suit you best. And then the vicissitudes of life happen as we go along. And some of your decisions are tailored because of what's happening in your life, for good or ill. And but as an artist, you work with those too, and those blend and meld with whatever art you are creating. Finally, just do it. Arthur Ashe said, start where you are use what you have, do what you can. It's often applied to other aspects of your life in terms of morality or political action, but it works just as well for your musical career. Voltaire said, "Perfection is the enemy of the good." So don't let your desire for perfection keep you from sharing your work. Henry James gave me a lot to think about when I saw this quote, and it's something I've been sharing with people a lot lately. Excellence does not require perfection. I touched on this much earlier, the concept of sharing. If you struggle with stage fright, and I have at various times, and not too long ago, Renee Fleming talked about how she had struggled with it for more than a year while she was in the major portion of her career. One thing that can help you get through it is not only redefining your performance from recital to being a performance program, but then to define that performance program as your ability to share what you love with your audience. You're sharing what interests you, you're sharing what you're working on right now, you're sharing what has meaning for you right now. And excellence does not require perfection. That's where your heart of just being there in the moment and sharing your music with someone can supersede much of the other technical aspects of the music. And that idea of focusing on the sharing is really a world-altering mind shift that can give you a new perspective, not just on any individual performance, but on what it is you're doing as a musician, as an artist. So this is the end of my talk. If I've given you one tidbit that helps you refine your next program or helps you rethink the way you approach things, then I've done my job. Hopefully I've given you more than one tidbit and given you a lot to think about and to spur your work on and to reassure you what I do truly believe, that the best way to make your program more interesting is to be yourself. Be as true to yourself and your interests and what excites you as you can be within the musical format. Share what you love. Share what you love. Wanted to say that a little more clearly. Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope this gives you things to work on.